Hey there, audio friends. Welcome back. MrAyrit here, and today we're talking Meze 105 Silva, I think is how you say it. Really like this headphone, so let's dive into it. We'll look at the build, we'll talk about value, we'll talk about sound, we'll talk about all that stuff. Box it comes in, pretty nice. I'm not going to talk too much about it. A little bit of foam padding inside, a little bit of documentation. It's a nice little box. Comes with Meze's kind of standard case here. It's a really nice kind of semi-hard case. I think this is pretty common with most of their headphones at this point, like the 109 and the 105 AER. Comes with this little cable pouch in it, you know, a pretty standard cable inside of here. This would be the default cable, which is, you know, an okay cloth cable. They also sent me, because this came from Meze, but I'm not keeping it or anything like that, but they also sent me an upgraded cable, which is the one I use most of the time, which was kind of a heavier duty cable. Feels a little bit nicer, a little bit of nicer connections and things like that. So that's the one I use most of the time, but the stock cable seems perfectly adequate. They also send a nice little USB to 3.5 dongle, so you can get listening right away. That should tell you, you know, instantaneously here that this headphone doesn't need a lot of power, so you can drive it pretty much off of anything, which is cool. So really a pretty nice package. You know, I dig this hard case. I like the setup. I like that it comes with the USB-C, so you get listening even if you don't have anything else. I like all that stuff. So all that was a big win in my book. It's typical Meze, which is a good thing. Let's take a look at these headphones. Again, typical Meze is how I would describe them. They do have their own, you know, unique look. It's different from the 109. It's different from the 105 AER in a very slight way. I mean, you can see it retains kind of the steel band, you know, their typical suspension strap, cup sizes, all that are pretty similar. Wood cups with, you know, kind of typical of Meze, I would say, you know, immaculate detailing. You know, the design with Meze is always top notch. I always gush about the design when I talk about their headphones. So they're not changing much here, but I think that's all in all a good thing. This is an if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of a build, and I like it. You know, it's comfortable. It fits on your head instantaneously. It's reversible, so like you'll notice there is no like, well, I guess it does say right and left on the cups, but you know, it's hard. You probably could flip it around. I don't know. Trying to look to see if the drivers look angled at all. Yeah, anyway, I didn't pay attention. I just am now noticing that it says right and left on there, so I could have been listening to them backwards this whole time for all I know. But anyway, it's a really nice build. It's a well-designed, well-built, very comfortable headphone. All that stuff is great, like is typical with these Mezes. So, let's talk sound. Now, I was listening to this thing, and I mostly listened to it with the Moondrop Dawn Pro. This is one of my favorite little like dongle DACs. This thing's about like 50 bucks if you pick it up. You know, it's nothing terribly fancy, but it sounds good with just about anything. And when, this has been kind of my go-to like by my bed listening thing, paired with, believe it or not, for me, the 6XX, which if you've watched the channel for a long time, you know I was never really a huge fan of these headphones, but I had the chance this summer to buy a set for like 80 bucks off somebody locally. So I thought, you know, okay, I'll give them one more shot. And, you know, interestingly enough, I've really enjoyed them this time around when paired with the Dawn Pro, and I think I finally kind of understand why people really like these headphones. We won't dive into these too much, but I'm going to re-review these in the near future. But anyway, I came from these to these. So one thing that impressed me with the 6XX, believe it or not, was listening to audiobooks on them. And that's what kind of like, that's where like it clicked with me, like the timbre and the naturalness of the voices, is I was like listening to audiobooks when I was going to sleep, and I was like, wow, these sound really good on the 6XX, you know, just the voices of the readers. So, and then I dove into that headphone and was listening to it quite a bit. Switched to this, and my initial impression switching to the 105 Silva was like, wow, this thing is bright. But I think it was just I had kind of settled into that 6XX sound. So then when I listened to this again the next time around, like I kind of listened to it for a good while and settled into the sound. And then when I picked it up and listened to it again a little bit later, I thought, actually, you know what? I really love this sound, and I feel like it's actually what, to me, the 105 Silva is like, it's the improved 6XX, right? So I think this, you know, when everybody was gushing about the 6XX and stuff like that and talking about how great it is, I never really connected with that. And I think it's just, I like more top end than that headphone offers. You know, it's got the veil to it. Well, this is like a 6XX with no veil, basically, and kind of better all around, I would say. So it retains that really great natural, like, vocal timbre, but it does it with high-end presence. It does it with good imaging. It does it with good separation. It does it all with super clean, punchy, textured bass. So to me, this is like the 6XX if the 6XX actually had all those things and not just good vocal timbre, right? Like, this is the whole package headphones. So there was a day where I just didn't want to take these off. I listened to them, you know, for probably like a couple hours straight. You know, well, I listened to them for like an hour during the day, and then later that evening I put them on and I listened to them for like a couple hours straight. And it's been pretty rare for me to listen like that with headphones anymore, just with, like, I have a 2-year-old and I'm back to work, you know, because I'm a teacher and stuff like that, so I don't have a ton of time. But man, I just fell in love with this headphone listening to it with the Moondrop Dawn Pro. I did do a little test where I listened to it with just the USB-C to 3.5 dongle that this came with, and I definitely prefer it with the Dawn Pro. You know, again, did it sound bad with that? No, but, you know, a lot more liveliness, punchiness, better separation, all that stuff came with the Dawn Pro when I added that in. So then I was listening to it, and I'm like, man, this sounds really good. And I'm like, well, you know, the 105 AR I didn't love. I mean, it wasn't a bad headphone, but I didn't love it. And that headphone was a $400 headphone, so I was really hoping this headphone, I was like, man, if this thing comes in at that price or even cheaper, it is just going to be a phenomenal value proposition. Well, it's MSRP is $500. Now, by no means do I think that that is an unfair price. I actually think it's still an amazing value, and I do feel like it would be one of my top picks in kind of that $500 price range. Like, I really do enjoy this headphone that much. But if it would have came in just a little bit cheaper, I think there wouldn't be much on the market that would compete with it for my preferences and enjoyment, you know. So again, I think, you know, if you love vocal timbre, if you like an exciting headphone that's punchy but still, like, well balanced and very natural sounding, I think this guy is one that you should give a serious look to. And again, one of the brilliant things about this headphone is you don't have to worry about spending a bunch of money on a DAC amp, right? You can just go out and get yourself a $50 Dawn Pro, pair it with this. You have a super portable, super versatile, excellent sounding, engaging head-fi setup that, you know, I think is hard to beat at the price point that all this is going to come in at. So I was super impressed with this headphone. I'm going to be sad to send it down the road. I think it's another win for Meze. I think out of, you know, in my opinion, out of their lower priced headphones, you know, even up to the 109, this is by far my favorite out of those. So, and, you know, again, Meze, I think the Empyrean series and the Empyrean Elite specifically, that was a headphone that I really love. So they've made so many headphones that I really, really enjoy. But this is probably the one that if I was going to add one to my collection, like, this would be it, just because I think it comes in at the right price. It's very easy to drive, and I can pair it with this little guy, and I just have a great little setup that isn't complicated but sounds fantastic. So, yeah, 105 Silva, big win for Meze. Meze, thanks for sending it out for a review. You guys, thanks for listening. Feel free to drop any comments, questions down below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.